Attending today's webinar. My name is Cindy Anderson, and I will be your moderator today. I am a senior product specialist and work with campuses introducing Upswing and our retention services, and we are very excited to be presenting our first webinar of the semester today. For those of you not familiar with Upswing, we are an online student retention service. Upswing partners with colleges and universities to increase student retention by at least 10% in several ways. We modernize college learning centers and academic services through online tutoring and mentorship while providing key analytics and data trends to college administrators. Today's presentation will highlight existing insights on student retention, along with proprietary research Upswing has conducted over the past year and a half of student usage. If you are interested in deeper insight into retention tracking at your schools, as well as student access to 24/7 online tutoring, please feel free to visit our website. And on to the presentation. To presenters, Melvin Hines and Alex Pritchett, who are not new to education in the field of student retention. Our first presenter today will be Melvin Hines, and Melvin is a co-founder and CEO of Upswing. He was born in Albany, Georgia, and was one of only 65 students to graduate from high school from his initial class of 250 freshmen. After graduation, he earned a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Georgia, as well as a Juris Doctor and an MBA from Duke University. Melvin was executive director of 2 tutoring and mentoring programs before working as a professor at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. There, he focused on arming first-year students with the tools necessary to stay in school and graduate. Our second presenter, Alex Pritchett. Alex is a co-founder and COO of Upswing. Before starting Upswing, Alex started multiple social enterprises in North Carolina and founded in North Carolina. He founded and grew a mentorship organization for Latino youth, specifically focused on increasing Latino graduation rates through tutoring, mentorship, and development of life skills. He also was one of the founding members of the Community Empowerment Fund, a nonprofit microfinance organization geared towards community engagement to work with citizens at risk of homelessness, where he led small business incubation and financial planning. He received his bachelor's degree in business administration and Spanish from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And with that, just a few housekeeping points. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the discussion, so please feel free to submit any questions you have at any point during our discussion. If there is video troubles, go ahead and click on telephone and switch over to the microphone and speakers if you're having any issues. And without further ado, I will now turn it over to Melvin.
It's great to see that all of you all are here today. Each year, $40 billion student tuition is lost due to nutrition. And this figure comes from research conducted by the Economic Policy Institute and was more recently confirmed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That actually comes out to about $7 million per school per year. In fact, about half of all students who start college aren't expected to finish.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen really is how in community colleges and 2-year universities, typically there's on average about a 45% dropout rate for first-year students. Huge number, really impactful. However, it's really the silent killer. People don't necessarily know that this is happening across the board. There's not enough focus placed on higher education, especially in schools that need help the most. However, something else really interesting is the impact that student nutrition is having on some of the larger institutions. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with one of the deans of retention over at Southern Methodist University, SMU. It's a large private school in northern Dallas. And one of the things that they were telling me was how they were seeing a 20% attrition rate every single year. So clearly there's really a lot of room for improvement in higher education, and not enough right now being done, at least not enough with the right focus. So we wanted to figure out what were some of the things that were really kind of leading indicators of student attrition, and how could we address them before it actually happens. One of the things that we've seen is that the first year is by far the most impactful determinant of a college's retention rate. Basically, what we'll see is that students in their first year are most prone to drop out, and every single year afterwards, the likelihood of their dropout decreases by about 50%. And this is supported by some information we've also seen from the Gates Foundation, which is the fact that some of the top students that graduate from some of the top universities, they'll go to college because of things like their college's affinity or the likelihood that they'll succeed after graduating from college. Whereas students who drop out, we've seen that the most impactful thing for them when they determine what college they want to go to is convenience factors, things like location, proximity to where they work, their family. So there's really a lot of opportunity there to start to build on some of these things and make it so that the reasons they go into school are some of the reasons why they're staying in school. And then really the third point there is the fact that students that drop out are dropping out because of a negative experience that they've had. They're not necessarily dropping out because of things that are financial or things that are academic, but there's really a lot of room for colleges to grow in the sense that they're providing a more personalized support system for these students. So one of the things that we've kind of seen across the board, aggregating some of these points, is how one of the most impactful things is really reaching out and making sure that colleges are creating personal engagements for first-year students. And that more than anything is going to really impact not only the experience for the student, but at the end of the day, the retention rates that the colleges see.
Yes, one of the things that we've seen to be most important is that personal engagement factor. Just a slight story about myself. When I was in high school in South Georgia, one of the classes I really struggled with the most was economics. It was a class that we had to take, and I remember just barely skating by and thinking, if I could just make it out of this class, I would never take it again. What I quickly realized was that when I went off to the University of Georgia and majored in business, was that once again I had to take economics again. And so it was, this thought process of, here we go again, let me just hold my breath and try and make it through. But the experience that second time was so much different. This time around, I connected with an instructor who had such a love and passion for the subject. And, we would get into discussions about how this ephemeral idea of economics could actually be applied to my everyday life. And, would have deep discussions. And that really led me to not only want to do well in the class, but eventually to actually major in the subject. And so 4 years later, I actually graduated with a bachelor degree in economics. And I think this is something that you don't just see here in my experiences, but in others' experiences as well. I'm sure you guys have similar experiences that you can point to where it was really the instructor or the tutor or the advisor who had that impact on your life and where you are now. Well, this is also something that we see resonating in research that has been done as well. Under the ACT report, What Works in Student Retention, ACT.org uncovered many activities that have the greatest impact on retention. And that's actually what you're seeing here on your screen. The mean contribution rating is essentially refers to the type of impact, the effect of the impact on each of the items that you see here on the left. And the incident rate refers to the number of colleges that they surveyed that actually offer these services. So for example, tutoring has a 4.11 out of 5 mean incident rate, and 95% of all colleges that were surveyed offer tutoring services. Um, Unfortunately, one of the things that we know is that efforts to reduce attrition cost not only additional time, but also precious resources. And as a result, many of the best practices that could be used to help benefit students are not being used by a lot of institutions. So take a look at these services. Things like increased number of academic advisors, a specific program for first-generation students, reading labs, and extended freshman orientations for credit are some of the things that have some of the largest impact on retention rates, but are also being used by as little as just 1/4 of colleges all across the country. And that's what we really wanted to talk about today, which is, what are some of the ways in which we, as colleges, as universities, can simulate the same experience, the same sense of engagement and impact without having to overextend that budget. And so what I'm going to show you now are 5 tips that we've seen working here through our research that seems to simulate that experience for students while allowing you to use some of the same resources that you already have in-house. So the first tip is to give your students a sense of choice when seeking support. It's amazing what something simple as giving that freedom to choose can do to impact their way of thinking. And this is something that is not just what we've seen, but it's something that's been seen in additional research as well. A widely recognized Duke University behavioral psychologist named Dan Ariely actually calls it the endowment effect, which is that people tend to ascribe more value to things merely because they tend to own them. And he's conducted several different research studies to show that, for example, having his participants create origami paper, and the more complicated the instructions were, the harder it was for them to complete it. And once they finished completing it, they were offered the ability to sell this to other people. He compared the price that those people who created those particular items with to the people who would purchase those items. And what he found was that the effect was actually 3 times as great. So people personalized that experience 3 times as much as other people who would objectively look at the product. And that's some of the things that we see happening here on our platform as well. Essentially, our students, just like the rest of us, tend to highly value the choices that we make compared to if it was just assigned to us. Here at Upswing, one of the things that we do is provide students with the ability to select their coaches that they'll interact with during each session, and it allows them to see up front who they're going to meet with, and in the future schedule additional sessions with them. And so what we've been able to do as a result of that is discover, what is the effect of this endowment effect. And here's some of the things that we've seen. 50% of the sessions that occur on Upswing have been with returning students. And 90% of all students end up following up in the exact same subject with that same coach that they worked with in the past. And this method, from what we've seen, has been immensely successful. We've gotten a 98% coach feedback rating as a result of allowing them to have that choice.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Melvin, and I kind of want to expand on that. So over the past couple of years, one of the things that we've taken a lot of pride in and we've dedicated a lot of attention to is really building a network of some of the best tutors, instructors, mentors from all around the country. We've been recruiting at places like really good public schools like UNC, University of Texas, also Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Brown. And one of the things that you would think is that students who are trying to find someone to connect with would only choose people in those top tiers. However, the results are actually a bit more surprising than that. What we've seen is that people tend to really value the connections more so than the credentials of the people that they're meeting with. So what we're seeing is people are connecting, students are connecting with tutors and mentors who really fit into their own affinity groups. People who share common things like gender, race, even geographic location a lot of times, even though it's online tutoring. And what this really led us to discover is how schools can really start implementing more things like this, where you look at the demographics of your students and you look at the demographics of your faculty, of your tutors, and it's really a good way to begin that engagement process, especially when you think about how to make first-year students feel comfortable with college. It's a really good place to start. And in fact, Cindy mentioned earlier how I started a mentoring organization back in North Carolina. It was focused specifically on Latino youth, and one of the first things that I saw was every single year, whenever I'd initially bring in some more students to join the program, they'd be really skeptical of us. They'd look at us, they'd think, how am I going to relate to these people? They're not like me. However, one of the things that I quickly found was, as I began talking to them about culture, as I would speak to them in Spanish, it really helped to eliminate a lot of those initial barriers that they had, and it made tutoring much easier. It made captivating their attention much easier as well, and it's really a great way to begin the retention process with students. However, we also realize that these aren't the only ways to connect with students, but it really does go a long way in helping build that level of comfort between students and the instructors and tutors that they're interacting with.
Yeah, definitely a great point, Alex. And so to quickly recap, the first two were to give your students that sense of choice when seeking support. And the second one is to try and learn that personal information about that student, and then find those tutors and mentors who can relate to that information as well. The third that we've seen is that offering flexible hours and availability for academic support has a major impact on retention as well. While traditional tutoring centers tend to provide a ton of benefit to many of their students, actually getting to that tutoring center is usually some of the most difficult problems for students that are at the greatest risk of dropping out in the first place. Many times, these are students who must balance work schedules and family life with also being a full-time or part-time student. And they usually need additional flexibility to match those needs. One of the things that we've been able to discover, our research team has been able to look into, are the times of availability that occur typically with tutoring and mentoring and advising sessions. Because we have a 24/7 model, one of the things we can do is take a pulse on when services are most often requested, and then shift the focus of the offering to meet that student demand. And so what have we found to date? Well, one of the things we found is that the majority of all of our tutoring sessions actually occur after the time that typical traditional tutoring and student support services close. So typically we're looking at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. But actually a lot of the services, a lot of the needs of the students occur between 5 p.m. and 1 a.m. And actually about a third of those services occur around 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. at night. And so what we've started finding out is that there are so many students that don't necessarily fit that traditional student model, and that number is increasing year over year. And so what we typically try and do is find ways to help support students in that regard, and that's one of the things that we would advise colleges to do as well. We do recognize that this ends up being a bit of a constraint and concern for some colleges. For example, one college that we most recently spoke with talked about troubles that they were having with not only recruiting the tutors that they needed to help support the students, but actually retaining them for long enough that they don't have to go back and do more recruiting within 6 months. And we know that this is something that occurs, all across the country. One of the things that we think can help provide that support is by offering those tutors the flexibility to be able to connect with students, not just in a physical location, but also online. Thanks to technology, there are different ways in which that can happen. Some schools, for example, have been using services like Skype to have a rudimentary type connection between those tutors as well as the students that they have at their school, and allowing them to simply just log those hours. And that really starts to benefit and help support students who need to get the support they're looking for late at night. Other schools have also been using services such as Upswing to allow for their schools to easily have tutors and instructors connect online when they're needed, and also from anywhere in the world, which, both of those types of services allow for the schools to keep their costs down, only pay for the hours that are being utilized, but also be flexible to the needs of those untraditional students.
Yeah, Melvin, and I think the point about recruiting and retaining tutors at schools is one that we tend to hear time and time again, and that kind of leads into our fourth point here, our fourth tip, which is to use peer tutors to help more students succeed. So at Upswing, one of the things that we try to work with our coaches on is finding different ways to really inspire the students that they're working with. It seems like an obvious task, but it actually takes a lot of effort to make sure that you're not just teaching someone a subject, but you're teaching them in a way that's going to inspire them to want to continue on with that subject, to do something with it. So they shouldn't only feel confident about their homework, but they should also feel confident in the way that they're attending school and why they actually chose to attend school in the first place. And there's a lot of evidence to back up these initiatives that we're doing. In fact, the ACT conducted a survey and a study, and what they saw was that some of the most important factors relating to retention were things like self-confidence and setting goals. And one of the things that we realize is how really providing this peer tutor network can help students to see the light in some of these things. It doesn't only have academic benefits, but it has these types of social benefits where if I'm a student and I may not feel like I'm fitting with the school, I may not feel like I have really good sense of self-confidence. By connecting with other peers, I'm able to see how they're succeeding, and it really starts to reflect off onto the students as well. So why would peer tutoring have other benefits? Over the course of a semester, there were over several dozen students that were surveyed, and they were showing that by doing peer tutoring, there's this concept called metacognitive regulation, where pretty much paired students are able to help each other understand where they're struggling, where they're coming from, because these students have most recently done a similar course, or because the student may know the way that a certain subject is taught at a school. I feel like they can relate much more closely to that peer tutor than they are to someone who may not have been to college for a while, or someone who may be a little bit more tied off from their college. So once again, online technology really increases the ability to lean on these types of offerings. It's as the student lifestyle gets more mobile, more flexible, it's going to be important to make sure that colleges are engaging students with things like technology. For example, Upswing allows colleges to use peer tutors so that you can connect in real time and get help when and where you need it. It helps with flexible hours and really engages students more often.
Yes, and once you have those sessions and you are working with the students and understanding what their needs are, the most important thing to do next is to continuously collect and analyze the feedback. Collecting that feedback and data is one of the most difficult things for colleges to do, mostly because it's hard to know where to begin. But it also doesn't help that students always seem to be busy to help with that process as well. You combine this with an already overworked staff and lack of immediate benefit, and it's easy to see why this is something that gets placed on the back burner. However, this can be one of the most valuable parts of your student retention plan. Hanover research highlights that collecting this type of data is one of the biggest factors separating high-performing institutions from other institutions. And this data doesn't have to be overly complicated either. There are key characteristics that you should look for in your data collection, which we will highlight in more detail in our next webinar. But collecting the feedback can be simple as well, once again, thanks to technology. If you want a simple process to acquire the information that doesn't also require hand transcribing data later on, you can simply use a Google form. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is a Google form that's been created, 2 very simple questions that have been created in less than 5 minutes. This can be submitted to students at the end of their sessions, and once they're submitted, they're automatically placed beautifully into a spreadsheet that you can evaluate at a later time. That allows for you or your staff or someone else who you would want to have look at and evaluate that data to understand what the struggles are with those students and be able to very easily go back, evaluate, and make changes in the future. If you are looking for things that are a bit more customized, there are companies such as Upswing that offer the ability to collect key retention information as well, providing things like real-time access to the data, as well as providing people who can help you walk through what you're seeing. In our case, we call them Upswing Higher Education Retention Officers, or Upswing Heroes, who help you understand each month the data that you're seeing and how this compares with your sister colleges as well. One of the key data points that we think is important is the quality of the session completed with every coach. And the reason why that's an important key data metric is because it allows for your school to get a stronger understanding of why students aren't coming back or are coming back to see some of those same coaches within your student center. And the same thing here at Upswing as well. It's one of the things that we tend to track. We also find that students like to provide this type of information back. So if you offer it to the students, even though they seem to be busy, one of the things that you'll notice is that the feedback that's provided tends to get longer and longer with each progressing time. And one of the reasons why we think that this is happening is because students like to be able to have a voice, to be able to voice their concerns or voice their congratulations to the coaches who have helped them succeed and helped inspire them. And so those kind of virtuous cycles that are occurring are one of the reasons why we strenuously tell each of the colleges that we work with that we want to have them provide more feedback and learn the feedback that's going on as well. One of the things that we've seen as a result of providing this feedback is that students on average are providing a 98% success rating or satisfaction rating with the services that they're getting. And so, when you're working with your college and when you're working with your student support center, providing this feedback can be a really good way of getting students to just be intrinsically happy with what you're offering as well.
Yeah, so basically I want to just go ahead and recap these 5 tips that we talked about today. Number 1, giving your students a sense of choice when seeking support, allowing them that flexibility to go out and choose who they're going to connect with. Number 2 is really learning about your students' interests to find mentors that they can relate to. So making sure that students feel like they're connecting with people who relate back to them. Number 3, offering flexible hours and availability for academic support. As we all know, student lifestyles are really busy. Often students don't start doing their homework or preparing for exams until night, so it's really important to be there when and where they need it. Number 4, utilizing peer tutors to really double the impact. So not only connecting from an academic standpoint, but also connecting from more of an emotional and a support standpoint. And then number 5, continuously collecting and analyzing feedback so that as a college you can be much more predictive in the way that you're addressing retention before it actually happens. So thanks again. I'm going to pass it back over to Cindy, and she'll take it from here.
Great presentation, Alex and Melvin. I think there was a lot of valuable information that our participants can walk away with today. And it looks like we have a few questions from our audience. So what I want to do is just take a couple of minutes to address those questions, and we'll have either Melvin or Alex answer them. So let's see. I have a question here regarding how do you choose your coaches. Alex, would you like to address that question?
Sure, that's a great question, Cindy. So basically, there's two different ways in which the coach process works. One way is we actually allow every college that we work with to bring their own tutors, their own faculty onto Upswing. So if you want to use it as an extension of your existing learning center, that's perfectly all right with us. What we'll do is we'll come in, we'll do training, periodic updates to your faculty and to your staff so that your own learning center essentially gets modernized, where you can bring your people online, connect with distance learning students, also connect with your own students if you'd like to, in-person students on nights and weekends. So that's kind of model number one. Model number two is actually connecting with the Upswing network of coaches. And the way that we go out there is very, very pragmatic in terms of how we're recruiting and vetting our own network of coaches. So the majority of every single Upswing coach is a student at either a graduate school or someone who is in the industry, either as an instructor, professional tutor, and they go through a fairly rigorous vetting process when it comes to identity verification, verification of their subject matter aptitude and knowledge, and then also we do a screening based off of just their ability to connect with people and really function as a teacher. So often what we'll see is the colleges that we end up working with will pick kind of a hybrid of the two, where they'll want to bring their own tutors online, but they'll also want access to the Upswing group of coaches for some of maybe the more difficult to recruit subjects, and then also additional help on the nights and on weekends.
Thank you, Alex. I do see another question here, and the question is, can you explain how our students connect with Upswing tutors? Melvin, would you like to go ahead and address this question? Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we tend to want to do is make it so that the college experience, your experience that you're offering to your students, gets passed through to the overall experiences happening on Upswing as well. So we actually allow students to be able to connect in two different ways. The first is that, like Alex was talking about earlier, being able to connect with your coaches online or even offline, and then collecting that feedback that we were talking about in point number 5. That's also important to making sure that you're getting you're able to make those informed decisions that you're looking for. So that's the first point. And then the second part is really connecting with those online coaches that we have as well in our network. And they connect there using online as well, using audio and video and a virtual whiteboard as well. And so what they'll do is the student typically goes in, they'll schedule that session. Once that session is scheduled, they'll both be taken to a virtual learning room. And at the end of that session, both the student and the coach can leave feedback on each other. And that allows us to also have informed decision-making that can help us to create a better experience for the students moving forward.
Thank you, Melvin. I do see, I'll take a couple more questions here. The next question is, how does Upswing provide 24/7 support to my campus? I'll hand this one over to Alex.
Thanks, Cindy. So when we think of support, we kind of think of support in two different ways. One is, I'll hit the first one, which is technical support. So anytime any college that we're partnered with has any sort of technical issue, problem, question, we're there for them. In fact, we have a customer support staff that is there real time. If you go to our website, you can check it out, live help. You can select that, ask any question, get immediate assistance. And if it's anything that we need to address, we're there real time. So that's really the first, I guess, support piece. The second support piece relates to the network of coaches. So one of the things that we've done is really build out again, the network of coaches by recruiting at different colleges across the country, and then also at sometimes across the world, where we're in the Ivy Leagues here. We're in some of the best public universities, we're also in some of the best public universities in Europe and in Asia, and that's able to get us to this 24/7 model where no matter what time of day it is, students are able to come in, get help. They can either schedule a session in advance or they can schedule an immediate session if those coaches are online right now.
Thank you, Alex. I have one more question we will address, and the question is, will there be a follow-up email sent outlining the discussion of today? And I can actually answer that one for you very quickly. We will be sending a recording out to all of our attendees, as well as the additional people that were not able to make it today. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up today. And as everyone knows, student success impacts us all, and I wanted to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. If anybody would like to stay for a brief demonstration to have a look at Upswing and go into a live portal at one of the schools we are supporting and take a look at our Learning Center, please feel free to stay. And with that being said, thank you so much for attending.